I command you to heal yourself.
Welcome back to episode 25 of the Mustache Room. Thanks for being with us. This is the second video podcast, so thanks for being there as we work through the kinks and we make this a refined product. On this episode, we talked to Brian Beckman. I met Brian when I was in Orlando at SoulQuest doing the ayahuasca retreat, and he's done ayahuasca a lot. Veteran of the plant-based medicine space, and he has some really good insight to share and talks about his travels abroad and what's coming next. A couple things that we missed in our conversation. There there are ways to get out of a bad trip. So Xanax and some other things known as trip killers, if you want to do some research, they're known to pull you out of a deep state in some instances. It's not necessarily guaranteed. So I wouldn't rely on that, but you're not completely stuck necessarily. So look into Xanax and some other options if you do get into a bad cycle. There's also the Zendo Project, which is something that I really believe in. It's peer psychedelic support. If you're having a bad trip, you can contact the Zendo Project and they can hold your hand over the phone. I believe they have the Zoom options as well. And just kind of work you through that nasty journey and however many hours you have left. So you're not completely stuck. Benzodiazepines, I guess, are what they call the trip killers. Look into that if you want to. I would recommend just having a good set and setting, which we'll talk about on this episode, and not having the need for a trip killer. When we did ayahuasca, there was the lemon salt trip killer. So there always is an option. But if you set the set and setting properly, proactively, you won't necessarily get there. Also, there are some microdosing protocols. So although we talk about the actual milligrams or grams associated with dosing in this episode, there are specific protocols, how many days to dose, how many days to take off to allow your tolerance to kind of stay strong and regain itself. So if you look up microdosing protocols, Dr. James Fadiman is kind of known as the founder of microdosing. You'll see the frequency and repetition and the other things associated with the actual dosing itself. I'm David Ben. Thank you for being here. Enjoy. All right, we are here, episode 25, and our guest today is Brian Beckman, who I met on my ayahuasca journey. Brian, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, David.
Brian was one of the more seasoned veterans of the ayahuasca group. You've done it 16, 17 times with your significant other. Pretty awesome stuff. What over the breadth of your experiences and abroad, you had mentioned that you thought Costa Rica was really the most profound or the most exciting, like total experience that you'd had. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Their venue is top notch. They take care of you, and if you haven't done ayahuasca before, it's inviting and it's safe. The environment they create, you definitely want to feel that way when you're doing something like ayahuasca.
Super important.
Good food, the facilitators of the whole nine yards. A lot of both a mixture of science and that spiritual side. They come together and explain it so you can make sense of it, but also experience it. So yeah, for sure, Costa Rica was a wonderful thing at Rismia. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. And how long do you have to commit to being in Costa Rica to do their sort of ayahuasca experience?
It's a 1 week, Sunday to Sunday.
Okay.
Some people after they're done, they're like, I don't have clarity yet, and they do another week on the spot. So it's
Oh
pretty
man.
common, honestly. Yeah, they a couple weeks, but typically it's a 1 week experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that people just have weeks to just, all right, I'll tack another week on and
Oh,
just push my workload ahead or whatever. The
I
luxury.
wish I could do that sometimes.
Yeah. Ah, that's awesome, man. And so I don't know if I asked you what got you into plant-based medicine, specifically ayahuasca. I mean, I've done it a couple times. It's been life altering. I've had specific intentions, but what really got you into doing it at that frequency, at that sort of commitment to the plant medicine?
Oh, yeah. We kind of fell into it. In retrospective, everything, in my opinion, an experience happens for a reason. And we found it on a YouTube video. And my wife and I were trying to make sure that, eating whole foods, taking some of the meats out of the diet, that type of a transition. One of the speakers actually went to Costa Rica, and she glue, or she was, I should say, glow. Um, and after watching that, my wife got really intrigued. And so she booked us. And from my experience, I'm very open to new things. And we got on a plane. I sat there, and I arrived not really having any expectations. And to answer your question, the frequency, uh, for lack of a better word, it talks with you, and it works with you, and it calls you back. And it's not like a phone call back. It's a feeling. And so, probably every 9 months now, on average, we get a refresher, let's call it, because you forget when you get home, your life gets busy, your patterns reignite,
Yeah.
some things move away, but it's very nice to have clarity, very, very keen and direct clarity. But every 9 months or so, so we've been doing this for ever since COVID, actually. It was the week
You,
before
man.
COVID hit is when we left. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's fantastic. So kudos to
yeah,
that YouTube video that sparked your interest and got
yeah.
you headed on that path.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's like a party at this point. It's a celebration when I have these experiences. You learn things and you remember things, but I was actually uh, Brad, one of the facilitators, talks about the Brazilian tradition, and ayahuasca is a great healing tool, but they use it as a culture, as more of a celebration. And I'm at that point now where you heal, but it's a celebration for me when I go now. So it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
I wanted to, so this podcast, we explore all entheogens. We love plant-based medicine, specifically psilocybin, which we had talked
Mhm.
about. And I wanted to, somebody that's really keen on establishing the mindset and setting your physical environment, your social setting. I wanted to kind of rehash those with my listeners because I feel dosing and establishing a set and setting are like so important when it comes to plant-based medicine, psilocybin specifically. And I feel like a lot of people treat it frivolously. And, the
Mhm.
old thing is like, hey, I'll take a couple caps and a stem and I'll see where this goes. But there's a lot more to it than that. So I kind of wanted to go over that for my listeners and kind of get your feedback and your input on how you help with your set and setting. The first thing I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on is just dosing. And ayahuasca is not really a recreational drug,
No.
so uh, I wouldn't say there's a recreational dose of ayahuasca. I don't think people are microdosing ayahuasca anywhere.
No.
Maybe, but with psilocybin, obviously, much more lends itself to microdosing and different sort of intake. And so I want to make sure people know that when we speak about different things that we're talking based on the type of dosing. So the most common dose nowadays that you hear about, just people run their day to day is with a microdose. And I don't know, have
Okay.
you established your microdose?
No, I actually haven't. I'm curious about it, but I haven't done a microdose program, or,
Okay,
or
so,
like a routine, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah.
so a microdose is essentially a tenth of what your mini or recreational dose would be. So if you took 1.5 grams and that's where you felt at one with nature, connected, you had all the physical effects, that would be your recreational, your sweet spot. And you would divide that by 10 to get your microdose. But you don't really know out of the box what your mini or recreational dose is going to be. So it's sometimes tough to hone in on the specific microdose, but a microdose is supposed to get you right below the threshold where the physical effects come in. So in a typical psilocybin experience, you would have crying and yawning and your hair may tingle and all these other things that are somatic and noticeable. But if you're microdosing and you're expected to go about your day to day with kids and other things, you can't be showing the effects of psilocybin. So you have to
Right.
hover right below that line where the physical effects come in, which I've found for me is like 150 milligrams, 200 milligrams, a tenth of what I would take recreationally, concert, camping, something like that to really enjoy the experience. That's what I found. but it's not a specific science, you know, and people have different tolerance levels and stomach
Right.
contents and things like that. So you have to kind of ramp up from maybe 100 milligrams and just incrementally see where you hit that threshold. That's
Right.
kind of a microdose.
Okay.
Now,
And
with the macro dose, and again, mini's in the middle. That's, hey, I'm going to hang out with the flowers, whatever. But the macro dose is more of the therapeutic dose where you're really going to go under the knife, and that's more of what I do. So the micro dose is more of like a sustained, drawn out, kind of like ayahuasca versus DMT. Like the DMT is like, let's
right.
crush it right now in 20 minutes, whereas the ayahuasca be drawn out over several hours.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I like to hit it. I like to hit it hard. I like to have my experience. I like to be gripped. I like somebody to grip me by the ears and say, hey, this is what's going on. That's a macro dose. And for me, that's like 5 grams or more. Terrence McKenna called it
Okay.
the heroic dose. That's the heroic dose.
Yes, I'm right there with you. I'd be sitting in the car in the passenger seat and that with that mentality. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. One thing that came to mind too with the microdose versus the macro is you're right, there's different tolerance levels. You have to find that space. There's also experience with, for example, like meditation and be able to quiet the mind, to be able
Totally.
to even notice it's happening. And whether you go deep, like you're talking about under the knife, as you said, um, yeah, the mind becomes very apparent when you go deep. And so I'd imagine, this is a guess, but microdose, if you're very quiet in the mind and you are able to maintain that, you can probably feel it much easier, much easier.
That's a really good point. I've talked about that
Mhm.
on episodes in the past. Meditation is such a valuable tool for navigating that mental space and just having the
Mhm.
confidence to just kind of go in whatever direction your mind takes you, and you know that you'll be safe and strong. So
Yes.
I'm a transcendental meditation guy, but whatever form of meditation or mindfulness, I think it's a great tool for having successful psilocybin or plant-based medicine experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. When you pair them together, they work together in harmony. Yeah, instead of fighting. Yeah, as you know on the mat, some
Totally.
people were fighting.
Jiu- Are you a jujitsu guy? I know you do yoga. Are
I
you
do yoga. I do
okay?
yoga. I have somebody that I know that does jujitsu, and he's very excited about it. He talks through it a little bit, and then I, of course, talk about yoga, and we share notes.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. I love yoga though.
Similar struggles, man. Yeah, a lot of definitely challenge your body in both different disciplines, without a doubt.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
back to the dosing. So the the micro dosing, again, you don't want any physical effects. Mini dosing, you at that point hopefully feel comfortable with the medicine and you can navigate the recreational or mini dose space. And then when it comes to macro, that's where that set and setting is super important. And that's where the music, like in our ayahuasca experience, that's where your physical setting, what you're wearing, who's around you, your responsibilities, your connectedness to technology, all those things are so important. So I have my recipe for establishing that stuff. I was kind of curious if you have, other than meditation, which is fantastic for your mindset, do you have any
Yeah.
tricks or anything that you follow to establish that proper set and setting?
Sure. Well, I would say a healthy mind space going into it. For me, it, it's roughly about 20 minutes before I start the shift, let's call it.
Sure.
And right now I'm sitting in a room that has, you can't see them, but there's plants in front of me and there's a little altar and there's just things that have meaning to ground you, to bring you back to nature, to your roots. So this is an option. It's a safe space, very important. The other thing that I really have enjoyed is I'm probably about 20 minutes away from the woods, so to speak. It's not the deep woods, but you can find yourself in, again, a safe wood space. There's no bobcats or bears or that kind of a thing, and you can sit out there. There's not a lot of people walking by, so you don't have to have that trigger like, I'm on mushrooms, or I'm on something right now. So there's nothing that can pull your attention away from yourself. And it's a beautiful place in nature because then you see nature differently, colors. You become very connected. You know, it's not that you have your face pop out in every tree, but it's something like that. You feel like you are one with the different stimulus, and nature's the best versus like looking at a computer screen. Like that's, you can have a wonderful experience there, but it's going to be a little different. Yeah, yeah.
I totally agree. And you're in Montana, right?
I'm in Montana, yeah, Kalispell area. Yeah, it's beautiful out here. I got the park next to me, got mountains all
Wow.
around. What the air is clean. I know sometimes I'm from Seattle originally, and it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know until you experience it. So
The nature thing is awesome. In the
mhm.
past, I've had really good experiences going to the botanic gardens and just kind of noticing the bees pollinating the flowers. There's just, like you
Mhm.
said, something different about your connectedness with nature. All the trees start to dance for you. The clouds start
Yeah,
to kind of organize into just weird patterns, like they're trying to court your attention. There's
yeah,
just, yeah, there's something about it that is just fascinating. So I'm with you. Anytime you can introduce the natural components to try to trigger that stuff, absolutely.
mhm. Yeah. I think Alan Watts talks about a lot. Nature's squiggly lines, and you fly in an airplane, and you can really quickly identify where humans have been. They're squares and they're lines, and nature doesn't talk that way. So you know, when you're in nature, you can appreciate it, and as you sink and be, for lack of a better word, you become nature. If you're not in a box anymore, you can really, you know, it'll go a little deeper, in my opinion. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
man, that's awesome. With the dosing, so the strains come into play, and I'm not a big proponent of every strain has its own personality, but I am a big proponent of different strains have different potency. So I just want to make sure that with the dosing thing, the basic strains like Golden Teacher, B plus, Treasure Coast, the more common basic strains, that's kind of where I gauge everything from. But there's also more potent strains like Penis Envy, Tidal Wave, crossbreeds of Penis Envy and Tidal Wave. They can get crazy. I can't even go through the list. But if you head into that more potent category, you're going to have to reestablish a baseline. You can't just use your baseline of Golden Teacher, B plus, Treasure Coast as the same baseline for something that's maybe three, four, even more times stronger than that strain. So I don't know if you've encountered any of those issues, but that's something that I
Yeah.
want to try to steer people away from because that can hit you like a ton of bricks.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I've read stories about a lesser plant, not lesser plant, I should say, it doesn't hit you as hard, like THC, for example. And I think when it rolled out in Colorado, there were stories that somebody would take an edible and not feel it for like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, oh, I didn't do it right. So they double it up. And then all of a sudden, man, it hits them real hard, like you're saying. And when you're dealing with different yeah, strains, even ayahuasca has different strains to it, like yahe, that stuff's powerful. And
I didn't even know that.
so
Different strains, huh?
oh yeah, yeah, very much. Well, some are more purgative than others. Some you have I don't want to go into too much detail to scare people, but like, you know, howls, like people are in night terrors, like I've witnessed that stuff on Yahe because it's very intense. But to your point,
My.
you got to understand that if you're with a facilitator, you know, it's safer that way. But if you're by yourself, absolutely, you want to understand what you're doing through experience and kind of ramp up to it, not just jump in. Yeah.
Oh, totally. And that's a really other good point is if you're doing it by yourself, if you're that graduated and you feel comfortable with the space and whatever
Mhm.
happens, you can triage it. That's fine. Not everybody's at that level of psychonaut. Some
Mhm.
people really need somebody to what they call hold space. So
Yes.
if you don't have somebody that can hold space, and by holding space, I mean basically being there to nurture you, not give you anything to introduce thoughts or judgment into your head, be just there, write something down, remember something, kind of your butler, your nurturer
Yes.
for that experience. And like that's kind of a shitty thing to throw on somebody that's designated driver esque. So not everybody's up for it. You don't necessarily trust somebody for that. So I don't know, does your wife or do you mutually like hold space for one another if you enter that kind of stuff?
Yeah, very much. We both hold space for each other. I don't want to compare too much, but I seem to find the ground a little quicker. And so when you talk about being a butler, it's very fun. And as a recommendation, if you have a friend or somebody you trust that is comfortable, when they're in that deep space with you, you can connect in even a deeper way with that person and with what you're trying to accomplish when you're holding that space. Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
Somebody that
Hmm.
has a knowledge of you and kind of knows how to interact with you, that's helpful. Like just a
Hmm.
neutral party is great to be there, but somebody that knows you is an added bonus for sure.
Hmm. Well, and then when you said too, what you're speaking to is a many forms of fear, and if you have somebody um, trigger you through thought, or to put you in a place of pressure when you're in that altered space, that's when it gets a little bit hard. And so, like you're saying with your butler, if they know who you are and they nurture you, you're going to have a better time, and you're going to go deeper and be able to heal. Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely.
You have to be able to let go and release. And the
Hmm.
worst thing that could happen, I mean, let's be honest, this medicine is non-lethal, it's non-addictive, right? The one risk is the temporary psychological damage that could happen by having a bad trip. You want to avoid the bad trip, definitely a nasty time. But I mean, worse, you're not going to die. It'll just be a rough roller coaster for X number of hours.
Yeah, and you want to have a safe space so that when you do it, you actually get the healing, and you would like to introduce it to yourself again. And versus, I've heard of really poor experiences or facilitators that invite people in, and they charge lots of amount of money, and then they don't even feed you right, and it just sets a bad tone for what really is possible. It can go, it's a beautiful experience. So yeah, don't rob yourself of that for sure.
Oh yeah, you're
Yeah.
so vulnerable. It's a
Hmm.
delicate space, man. But yeah, whatever your recipe is to help you really be able to let go, like whatever that is. Like if you need to wear a satin bathrobe and have a lollipop, like whatever your recipe is, like that's fine. Like your
Yeah.
goal is to relax so much that the medicine can go to work. So the
Yeah.
trip
And the
sitting
music
is
too.
super important.
I
Oh,
like that
so
you
like
that you add music in. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Liquid Bloom is my favorite. They have like such a big palette of music, but the stuff that we got, the Isha stuff that we got from the
Yeah.
Orlando trip. Anybody in particular that you have on your playlist that might be worth sharing?
Over time, I have a pretty good ear for music, and things resonate. When you hear a song on the radio, you can sing the words before it even starts.
Sure.
Over the 3, 4 years, I've just kind of been cultivating like different ayahuasca musics or Icaros, or like you said with Isha, like different chants
Yeah.
and things like that are more in a music form. And so, yeah, I don't know the exact amount, but I got like a day's worth of music that's saved, and I organize it in anywhere from 3 hour to 8 hour increments, depending on what you want to do. And there's different tones and moods. Some music is specifically designed to really work at you and pull at you and make you feel real bad, even though it's beautiful. And then there's others that, they're angelic songs, so to speak. They really rise your energy level and make you
No
feel
doubt.
beautiful and wonderful, maybe a tear to the eye kind of a thing. So, yeah, for sure.
The one thing that I didn't really understand when I first started introducing music that I've really learned to embrace is the lack of anything that I can understand. No English lyrics, nothing that I can internalize. And they call it hermeneutic interference. No hermeneutic interference. Foreign languages, humming, chanting instruments, but nothing where I can introduce a thought and now make that the entire basis for the rest of my experience. So
Yes.
if you speak Portuguese, maybe don't have the Portuguese songs, maybe pick a different something without vocals, but just make sure you can understand and internalize it.
Yeah, you can hear better. You can listen, really
Hey,
listen. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I love that.
So dude, we're running out of time here. I definitely don't want to push the boundaries of this 40-minute Zoom call, but I I really appreciate you hopping on to give your perspective on this stuff. I mean, it's a beautiful space. I've met so many awesome, interesting people, throughout doing this. And I guess what's next for you, man? Do you have like is there a Mount Everest that you want to climb with this plant-based medicine journey, or anything that's like on your bucket list that's next up for you?
You know, it's funny you say, after the first week that I had this experience, they typically come in groups of 3 or 4, and or 4 evenings kind of thing. It was a little bit of like, where am I going? And I got to climb this mountain. And over time, I don't know if you want to call it wisdom or not, but I've learned that I am here now, and I have nowhere to go. And I just need to experience the moment, be in the moment, and not project too far into the future. Um, but with that said, my wife has already booked us in November to go to Brazil, a different
Yeah.
place than Ishan, to do more healing, more experience in the jungle. And so that's the next step as far as like the next trip that we're going to take. But as far as like life ambitions, I've noticed that when you slow down and you live in the moment, truly live in the moment, let time go in the mind, um, you can be in a blissful state, even though life is challenging and
I
it
love it.
pulls at you. Yeah.
I love
So
that, man.
whatever comes is coming. Yeah. Whatever's coming is coming.
When you get back from your Brazil trip, we might have to circle back and kind of
Yeah. I'd
get
love
a
to.
review. Well, dude, this has been fun. And for listeners, I'm glad you got a chance to hear what Brian has to say. He's a true veteran of the space, and I love your commitment to the medicine, man.
Thank you.
I,
Yeah.
uh,
Right back at you.
the, thanks so much, Brian. I enjoyed speaking with you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
You too. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. We'll talk soon. Later.
Hey, brother. See you.
Bye. Mhm.